We want to take you now to Washington, where former President Donald Trump is expected to speak. He just attended oral arguments before a D.C. appeals court looking into his claims of immunity regarding his 2020 election interference case. His attorney is speaking right now. Let's go ahead and listen in.
That would be a direct attack on democracy, and that cannot happen. What was very significant today, and I'm sure you all caught it, is the special counsel conceded that if it was President Obama who was being prosecuted for a drone strike, then they'd have to consider immunity. But when it's not, when it's President Trump, then they're taking the position that there's no immunity for presidential acts that were required when a president is carrying out his job responsibilities. If we adopt what the special counsel wants, if we adopt what President Biden wants, then we open the Pandora's box to political prosecution after political prosecution after political prosecution. In fact, Joe Biden could be prosecuted for trying to stop this man from becoming the next president of the United States. We don't need political prosecutions, we need political process. I'd like to introduce President Trump.
Well, I want to thank you all, and we had a very momentous day in terms of what was learned and what they've conceded. They conceded two major points that were they were right in doing it. I don't think they had much of a choice, but they're very, very big, very powerful points. And I think we're doing very well. I think it's very unfair when a political opponent, is prosecuted by the DOJ, by Biden's DOJ. So they're losing in every poll. They're losing in almost every demographic. Numbers came out today that are really very mind-boggling if you happen to be Joe Biden. And I think they feel this is the way they're going to try and win. And that's not the way it goes. That'll be bedlam in the country. It's a very bad thing. It's a very bad precedent. As we said, it's the opening of a Pandora's box, and that's a very sad thing that's happened with this whole situation. When they talk about threat to democracy, that's your real threat to democracy. And I feel that as a president, you have to have immunity. Very simple. And if you don't, as an example, if this case were lost on immunity, and I did nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong. I'm working for the country. And I worked on very hard on voter fraud, because we have to have free elections. We have to have strong voters. We have to have free elections. Those two things almost above all. And we found tremendous voter fraud. We have a list of it. We have some findings if you want it. The press doesn't like reporting it, but we found tremendous voter fraud, determinative voter fraud. But we worked on that. That's what I was doing. And they were talking about after. Well, nothing has to do with after I left. It was during the time. And that was what they really focused on today during the appeal. And they concede that, and everybody concedes that. And if it's during the time, you have absolute immunity. So we'll see how it all works out. We have a great argument. We have an argument with, they conceded two major points today. In fact, I think it's probably a concession. You have to ask the lawyers, Todd, if you'd like to talk about it. But they conceded 2 points that I think were, by normal standards, if it weren't me, that would be the end of this case. But sometimes they look at me differently than they look upon others, and that's very bad for our country. You had a very big event yesterday, as you saw, in Georgia, where the district attorney is totally compromised. The case has to be dropped. They went after, I guess, 18 or 20 people. They wanted to go after a lot of other people. They wanted to go after senators. She was out of her mind. Now it turns out that that case is totally compromised. In fact, they say she's in far more criminal liability than any of the people she's looking at. So I think that when you look at what happened, where they pay a lawyer with absolutely no experience $700,000 who happens to be her lover or her boyfriend, and then they go on trips and vacations together, very expensive vacations together. And the reason they paid him so much, because he was after me, because this way they can afford to pay him a lot more. It probably passes certain tests. And that's a very sad thing that happened in Georgia. And I would imagine that case is going to be dropped. Every legal analyst that I've spoken to, every legal analyst that I've read have said that case is so compromised now it has to be dropped. Very good people.
You have been listening to Donald Trump speak after he attended oral arguments today in the D.C. Appeals Court looking into the former president's immunity claims in the 2020 election interference case. Jessica Levinson joins us now for more on this. She is a CBS News legal contributor and a professor for Loyola Law School in California. Jessica, just a moment ago, we heard the former president once again repeat claims of immunity and also talk about the fact that he said that he did nothing wrong, that he was working for the country. Explain for us, first of all, the legal basis for the concept of presidential immunity and how it may or may not apply in this case.
So exactly right. We should start with what the law provides. And the law provides that there is this thing called presidential immunity because we acknowledge that presidents don't have normal jobs. We acknowledge that they have to be able to function without fear that they're going to be sued for every decision that they make. But that concept is limited. It's not absolute. So the doctrine of presidential immunity basically has two buckets. One is we don't want the president to face civil suits for every decision they make, like, for instance, to fire somebody. The other is that we want presidents to be able to have open and transparent discussions with high-level officials, particularly when it comes to national security and or foreign policy issues that are particularly sensitive, without worrying that they might have to hand those conversations over and it might look bad for them. What the doctrine of presidential immunity does not, in my view, say is that presidents are absolutely immune from criminal prosecution, even based on acts that they undertook while in office.
So let's turn to today. How did federal prosecutors counter Donald Trump's claims that he should be shielded from prosecution?
I think federal prosecutors pointed at first to this concept that no person should be above the law. Second, they pointed out that, yes, while there is this thing called presidential immunity, there are other things that balance against it. For instance, the public's interest in ensuring that criminal investigations can proceed, the public's interest in making sure that if somebody does, in fact, violate criminal laws, then they would be brought to justice, because otherwise the criminal justice system truly does crumble. I think the other thing that the federal prosecutors pointed out here, and there was a lot of detail, is that it simply can't be the case that we want to create a doctrine of presidential immunity. And this was a key exchange where a president could order, for instance, an assassination of a political opponent and then be free of any sort of criminal repercussions because they could say, well, I was president and I engaged in official acts.
So what happens now at this point, Jessica?
What happens now is we wait for the D.C. Circuit, that's the appellate court that heard the arguments today. We wait for them to hand down their decision. What I heard was a 3-judge panel that was very skeptical of the Trump's arguments here, the Trump team's arguments. At that point, the case will then, we expect that the former president will appeal this up to the Supreme Court. And the question is, will they take the case or will they just say, you know what, the D.C. Circuit got it right? Back down to the trial court, at which point the federal election interference case pending against him would proceed.
And so how might this affect, Jessica, some of the other legal challenges that former President Trump is facing?
Great question. So this is a case that would affect the federal election interference case that we've been talking about, would also affect the Georgia election interference case, because we're talking about, again, acts that the president took while he was president. It would not, in my view, affect the other federal criminal case pending against Trump, which is the case dealing with Mar-a-Lago and the alleged unlawful retention of documents, because most of the actions in that complaint were taken after the president was in office. And so even under a broad reading of presidential immunity, I don't believe that doctrine would cover him. It also would not affect, for instance, the New York civil case pending against him. And we could talk about the other civil case involving E. Jean Carroll, but it looks that that case, that defamation case, will also be able to proceed, again, unrelated to anything that happens based on the legal questions raised today.
Is it unusual to be hearing from the former president at these various points after these proceedings?
I can't think of another analog, frankly, for any of this. So yes, I mean, I would honestly say this is unusual. Is it unusual that we hear from criminal defendants after there have been arguments? No, sometimes criminal defendants come forward and say, we had a great day. But to hear from a former president, I mean, I think and hope that this is still extraordinary. And we, again, don't have a historic analog.
All right, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for covering the legal ins and outs and for giving us that context. We always appreciate your analysis.